Hey, here we are, number 3, back with the endocrine on the endocrine, the other ones right there, the adrenals. So the adrenals and such are sitting above your kidneys right there. And the adrenal has an inside and an outside, an inner medulla and an outside cortex. And when you read the lab book, you can read and learn the names of those 3 layers in the cortex, and specifically which hormones are produced and released by each specific layer. The important thing with is the medulla. The medulla produces and stores epinephrine and norepinephrine. And of course, epinephrine is the one that gets your heart racing and does other things. These are part of, and this is really all part of, when you think about it, your autonomic nervous system and your fight or flight right there for those guys. So, so you will get a sympathetic impulse, right? So, and that works on the cortex, and that hormone is part of this fight or flight. And then that'll produce these mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, or your adrenal or your sex hormones and such. And they will work to help keep you alive or to help you get out of trouble and such, if you will. So the minerals are affecting your electrolyte balance, which affects your water balance, which affects your blood pressure. The glucocorticoids, this is in response to stress. So think about what stress is and what stress does, but it raises your glucose levels. And it does it by breaking down fat and breaking down protein. So it increases glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. So if you're stressed and you're eating sugar, you're getting a double dose of glucose, and you got a little type 2 diabetes coming your way. It also suppresses your immune response. And so it lowers your immunity, and when you're stressed, you're going to get sick. And it affects your inflammatory response. And this is, if you think about it, you're running from the guy with the chainsaw, you trip, you twist your ankle, you can still keep running because it's not going to swell up right away. Once you're out of danger and you can relax, then it'll swell up. So, but it inhibits that, the adrenal gland does, through the glucose, for the cortisol and such. So here you can see there's that adrenal gland, there's the medulla, there's the cortex, and here's the 3 layers of it again right there. So I don't have them in order, so don't go off of that as the order of the layers and such, but you can see that the glucocorticoids are from one of the layers of the cortex, the mineral, which is aldosterone, and then your testosterone, estrogen, and such from another layer. When you look at a slide, and I put some slides up in there in the lab folder, you can really see those layers. They're easy to discern and figure out. So, hey, there you go. I thought I had one in there. So there is the capsule around it all. There's the zona glomerulosa, and then the fasciculata, because they have a certain shape to them, and such, they stack up, and then reticularis, they wiggle back and forth, and then you're into the medulla. So if you look, and on the slide in the lab and such, you would kind of be looking at this area right here. So you would go cortex, medulla, cortex, because you're looking from the top to the middle, back to the bottom and all. But there's those 3 layers. I did it again. I mean, I knew I put them in there. So there you can see them even more, and how that's why they come up with the names. Once you learn what your names mean, it helps all of this make more sense and all. So I did it again. I mean, so here they tell you the aldosterone is more outside, so that is the glomerulosa. Cortisol is kind of the middle, and that is more of the fasciculata, and then the androgens and such, the sex hormones and such, more the interior, the reticularis. Ta-da! You're welcome. Catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and that is the medulla. So the thyroid, of course, is located in your neck. It's a gland composed of these round structures known as follicles, and they're like little balloons. And you have the follicular cells, which makes up the outside of the balloon, and then the middle part, the gel-like material in the center, is actually a precursor of the T4 and the T3s and such. And when you hit it with the TSH, there you go, thyroglobulin, then that triggers it and it's produced, and then you produce both T4 and T3. They travel through the blood. One is immediately used by the cell, and the other one kind of stays. And then when it gets in the cell converts it. So you have nice continuous levels. You don't have highs and lows of this rascal and such. So metabolic rate, growth rate, onset of sexual maturity, a lot of that's affected by the thyroid gland. Now, in between the follicles, you have cells, and they are called parafollicular cells. And they produce and release this hormone, calcitonin. And that right there affects your calcium regulation. It works with the parathyroid gland. The parathyroid gland produces PTH, and those two affect your calcium levels and such. The pancreas is a dual role. It has part to do with the digestive and also has part to do with glucose levels and such. It's part of this glucose regulation and such, and it releases a couple of hormones here, insulin and glucagon. It'll release another one called somatostatin, which is it's kind of like it's a growth factor. They call it IGF, insulin growth factor as well. But we're just going to worry about the islet cells, and I call them islets of Langerhans or Langerhans cells. But if you just call them pancreatic islets, I think you'll be okay. So you eat. I just had lunch. Your glucose levels go up. Your body measures that. It sees that, and it says, hey, we need to get that glucose level down, so it secretes insulin. That causes your cells to take in glucose. Well, now all the cells are full of glucose. What do you do with the extra? It triggers the liver and your skeletal muscles to take that glucose and turn it into glycogen, which is a compound polysaccharide, like starch in plants, but in animals it's glycogen. All right, you don't eat. And then after a while, your glucose levels drop. That inhibits insulin production, and it triggers the pancreas to start secreting glucagon. The glucagon then goes to your liver and says, hey, you remember that glycogen? Yeah, I need it back. And it tells it to turn that glycogen back into glucose. So your glucose levels start to go up. And it should keep your glucose in a nice, even range. And then when that happens, everybody's happy. When you don't produce the insulin, you're type 1. That's a genetic disorder. Not your fault. When you eat too much sugar, when you stress eat and do other things, then you actually cause your target cells to become insensitive to the insulin, and that's adult onset diabetes or type 2. There might be a genetic link to it. There's a little bit of one there is and such, but there's also environmental. That's you shoving a Twinkie down your pie hole right there, environmental. So diabetes is a very debilitating disease. I have it as the second leading cause of blindness. It is one of the biggest drains on all of us, and it's the type 2 is self-inflicted. Type 1, hey, not your fault. You just got a bad hand. So, but you can see what all the diabetes does to a person and such. So, other messengers that the body will produce. Hey, virus. Look at there. When a cell is infected with the virus, the cell's done. It's going to die. But it will release these proteins called interferons, and they just go to the local cells, just neighboring cells, and they say, hey, I've been attacked. I'm going to die. Protect yourselves. That also helps prevent the release of the viral particles from that cell and such. Prostaglandins are a type of fatty acid that's produced in the body and such, and it kind of acts similar to hormones. It just affects localized cells and all. So most cells produce prostaglandins, and they just work on cells right next to them, neighboring cells. Other chemical messengers that are out there, pheromones are one of them. These are chemical signals that travel between organisms and such. Animals, we can see these and we can measure these and such in animals, the lower animals. But in humans, they've never been able to isolate it. Anecdotally, they know it's there, they think it's there, but they can't isolate it and such. So, all right, that leads us to our cycles. The cycles and such, I don't know if you're hibernating. Probably not now. Body temperature wise, mating behaviors, physiological things, and these cycles can range from minutes to years, and they occur throughout the animal kingdom. You're part of that. These cycles and such are known as your circadian rhythms, and they can act on your adrenal corticotropic hormone, your thyroid stimulating hormone, your growth hormone, and everything else. So your menstrual cycle is controlled by a series of these hormones in a cyclical fashion. Thyroid secretion is affected by seasonal, and that's affected by temperature and such. So if you think about it, we're sitting here right now, and we're moving into the spring, I hope. And so we're getting longer days, and that comes in through your optic nerves. And your optic nerves cross at the optic chiasma, and there's an area of the brain right above that, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That, when it gets stimulated by the length of day, then sends signals to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland releases its melatonin and serotonin and such, all of those things, and then that in turn goes, and then you have you feel good in the summertime, you feel dull in the wintertime. So, all right, endocrine gland, endocrine system, done and doner.